It's another episode of Feed the Trolls, and I've been very stressed about this one because I have this funny feeling that we're going to record this episode, talk about Team Liquid, and before I have time to edit it and upload it, they're going to make another change, announce a new player, and this whole thing will go. That's what's going to happen. But you know what? YEKINDAR and Thorin are here to chat about Team Liquid anyway, so fingers crossed I can edit faster than they can change players, which might not be.
By the way, that is a valid concern, because I will say I do a different show with some people that are mainly from League of Legends, and they sometimes do like a CS-related topics. It's sort of like an esports show. And I'll give you an example. They recently did do a topic like that, where it was about G2 and CSGO, and CS2 rather, and their whole thing was sort of like, but who might replace next? Who would we see? And I had to be like, it's the Malps guy. It's actually already done. Like, well, no, but what do you mean? Like, who could it be? And I was like, well, look, I know it hasn't been announced, but it's literally just that Malps guy. Like, so it could be like that. I get you. That does happen for sure.
I'm just happy because I thought the way you started it, you know, it's only because I'm the guest. Like, come on, the first time you have a weird feeling. What, like me and Duncan are just a recipe for disaster on a talk show? I'm like, well, I just got here. I didn't even say anything edgy yet.
You know what's ironic is the first time I ever had to work with YEKINDAR on a desk was a year ago for IM Cologne, and I
bet you were mad intimidated, weren't you? Come on, admit it.
So afraid. I said to him in the green room that I actually said to him, I was like, do you know how terrified I am of you? And I've actually told him that like 4 times in a green room. But now I've worked enough with Duncan on Feed the Trolls that I just actually don't think anyone can scare me anymore.
Okay.
So
I'm nothing compared to him. And I think Duncan, I think when she said that, I replied, yeah, you should be.
You did actually the first time,
reasonable,
which did not help me at all. But there you go. Let's get into this now, because obviously the Liquid lineup is going to be the topic of conversation. It already has been, but I always like to go back to talk for someone that isn't really paying attention to Counter-Strike. They came in, they announced that they'd taken Twistzz from FaZe. They had cadiaN as an IGL. They produced this amazing team that was going to be led by Zews, and everyone was really excited. Obviously, there was also that gorgeous cadiaN romance breakup story that we were going to get to use after what had happened to him at Heroic. On paper, why did we love this team? What was it about it that we thought was going to work, Yanko?
Well, I think it was just an exciting mix of players. In a way, I think also on paper it made sense, right? Because you're thinking, okay, cadiaN, such a great job in Heroic that he did with those players. Now on paper, he has better players. Sure, it has to be in an English-speaking team and an international team. But you're thinking, okay, wow, if they were just on the cusp with those guys and they had the choking problem in some of those games, like with proven players like Twistzz and Naf, you know, this should be after a few months of just getting adjusted and getting on the same page and all of that stuff. Like, this team should most definitely be a contender. I don't think anyone really expected it in the first season. Probably like you would say in the second season, they need to be a contender. In the first season, you're figuring everything out. Maybe you need to make one change during the player break. Maybe someone doesn't work out, right? But I think that was the main reason that you had a good amount of veterans on that team, accomplished, established players, and that you were thinking, okay, eventually they're going to figure it out.
Eventually they were going to figure it out. But then obviously we started hearing the gossip that cadiaN was going, and everyone was quite shocked. Do you think that their performance was as bad as everyone sort of, was it bad enough that you start looking at cadiaN going, he needs to go? I mean, was it Falcons horrific? Because I'd argue, Duncan, it wasn't really.
No, I actually think that's even the unfair thing. I think that's the good reference point, by the way, because those are two massive like projects, super teams. Everyone's expecting big things. But the difference is, I always say this: if you ever like just watch a Falcons game, like they have just inherent problems, even in like the build up of a single round. Like you can just see the flaws there. You can see where people don't connect. The difference with Liquid was, I actually do think the main problem for Liquid is it's like the whole perspective thing. Like when we did the G2 episode, my point was, if you're someone like Huxley or Nexit in G2, maybe these results are fine. They're pretty good. If you're Nico or Monacy, maybe they're terrible. Maybe you have to win everything and win the majors. So similarly, my problem, I think, with this team goes like this. If you are some of the lesser players, these weren't terrible results. They weren't good results, but they were like, I think they were always like one match from being a good result. You know, they'd make a playoff. They'd get like third map against a good team, but they'd just lose 13-11. The actual games looked decent. will say, though, they never did live up to the dream you were building of like what we all thought when we looked at the super team and imagined these names around kit. They never did ever live up to that. So my problem is if you're the obvious person is Twistzz. Twistzz just came from winning everything in phase, and then people know you not only had the choice to go to Vitality. I've heard even during Team Liquid, there was big teams potentially behind the scenes like, maybe you should come and join us, mate. So if you're Twistzz, these results aren't good enough. Like to you, it's like, I'm not only am I playing well, but I should be in one of the best teams.
I think, though, you could tell, I don't think the results were that bad. I think it shows you how problematic these underlying issues were and how deep they were. Because absolutely, I mean, what you're looking for in that first season is signs of promise, right? Obviously, it's hugely disappointing to not even make it into the major, right? No matter how shitty the format is and the RMR and the best and whatever, you know, but you're still knowing that this is a long-term project and everything. So that just tells you they very quickly lost all faith that they could work together with cadiaN, you know, and with his style in a sense of leading or running the team or just his personality, whatever. Like it clearly wasn't going to work moving forward. And I think that's why it was also so shocking, right? Like you're thinking he is one of the biggest pieces. It's so hard to find a good in-game leader these days, especially a blue chip one, a veteran, right? So to hear that he is the one on the way out means that they really couldn't find common ground at all.
I want to jump into the mind of a fan, which is going to be very scary for all of us. But I did find it, this was just a personal observation, is when cadiaN was on Heroic, everyone hated him. Like it was just everyone's favorite thing to complain about cadiaN. If he so much, I remember him, he shouts at the Mongols, he must be kicked out of the tournament. He's the worst. Then the whole Heroic thing happens, and suddenly cadiaN is everyone's hero, and everyone is rooting for cadiaN because they feel like, you know, he's been stabbed in the back. Do you think as well that that kind of also hypes up the Liquid change a little bit as well? Because there was this like, well, cadiaN, this is his rise. He's going to come in here and he's going to basically like show his team what they lost. And then because it seemed like there was taking a little bit of time for them to find any sort of synergy, it made it worse maybe for the team because you had all this noise from outside being like, this is it. You've got these good players. You need to go in now and show everyone that they shouldn't have kicked you.
Well, I think for cadiaN, I think his arc is really good, but he kind of ruined it with the whole Hunden situation and how he as a captain handled that. And I don't want to get in, we don't need to get into that right now, but that's a stain on his resume and on his arc that was actually incredible, you know, from a guy who was an analyst for a couple of events in 2015, 2016, to playing in NA, to having to be in North, right? Removed from that here and there to finally bounce back and create, you know, and be the captain of a great lineup and actually win some tournaments and achieve something. I mean, that's a feel-good story. You want to get behind that. And even with all the stuff about online, and, you know, no one really cared. It was all online at the time, and I think they've proven to be a good team on LAN as well. So I think, yeah, that's why, you know, people were like, especially with how it was perceived in the public, the whole Heroic situation, right, with Stone and Yabby and whatnot. But I mean, we can also question that now. How things exactly happened, because you see how quickly things deteriorated in Team Liquid. So maybe there is something, you know, where it's difficult for people to find common ground with him or to buy into it. And it's different because you have to remember when Heroic was on the way up, who was Stone? It was nobody. Like that was his, you know, breakout team in a way. So those were players that he had who didn't have an ego, where he was, you know, they were just buying fully into it and he was able to lead them in whichever way he wanted. You can't come, you know, to Twistzz and just be like, hey, you're going to have to do things my way or whatever it might have been. That was the issue, right? Like that's where, you know, you have some of these guys who are also veterans extremely. I mean, Twistzz has accomplished a lot more in terms of trophies and whatnot than cadiaN. So they demand an amount of respect, and with them you sort of have to meet halfway, and it's a whole different dynamic with players like that than we having younger guys and you're the oldest and you're the captain and the heart and soul of the team. So I think the jury in a way is still out, right? And it will be very interesting to see where he takes his career next, also in a sense, because there's not a huge amount of options, it feels like.
I think it's actually a little bit unfair how what you're talking about has actually affected like the lens people look at this situation through. Because if you go, like you said at the beginning, before they make the Team Liquid lineup, like they announced the lineup, you haven't played a game yet. I think actually at the time, all the goodwill was on cadiaN's side. All the fan sentiment was like, fuck Stabby. They literally did backstab him, and they, and they didn't, and the whole perception was, they didn't know what they had, and they were all egotistical and didn't understand team dynamics. And he's such a brilliant captain. They've obviously been horrible, and they're just bad people. Fuck everyone. By the way, that's why everyone was loving Astralis failing that RMR to be like, see, doesn't pay to do Game of Thrones shit. And so I actually think going into Team Liquid, if anything, I think everyone was wanting to give him a chance. Like, hey, like YNk says, give him all these good players. By the way, the other reason it's a killer on Team Liquid is you look at all the players except skullz. These are like normally HLTV top 20 players. Like, you couldn't ask for better pieces. If you asked a fan, even when Heroic was around, if I take out Twistzz and put Prime YEKINDAR in there, if I take out like Stown, but I put in Twistzz, like they'd go, these are upgrades, you're going to win the major. So I think actually going into it, everyone had very positive, or they were open to the idea this was going to be brilliant for cadiaN. And if anything, this would be his time to now say to the Stabby guy, look at what you're missing. You fucked up. You didn't understand it. Whereas I actually think, sadly, like YNk alluded to, I think it's going to be the opposite now. I actually think now what people will think is maybe Stown and Yabby had a point. Maybe cadiaN was wilding a bit. Maybe his ego was too big. Maybe he demanded everything be his way, because that's going to be the perception what people take from this. And I think actually in time as interviews, I think eventually people will allude to like that was part of the problem in Liquid, because on the first thing about like how they did in the game, it wasn't bad enough that you would just kick the leader. Like there's normally if the leader is like someone you actually believe in and you think they have a good system, if anything, you'd kick a player and give him another chance, So the idea they're kicking the leader to me basically implies like it's almost like a mutiny. And internally, everyone's like, get this guy the fuck out. So I think it looks really terrible now in the contrast to the Heroic thing, because now people will probably think the Heroic thing was justified. Even though the reason I said it's unfair is I'd draw the analogy to what just happened to Huxley, where him not playing at Dallas makes people sure now that he's shit. But I always say, but it's not as black and white as that. Like, for example, Nico was probably calling from his playbook. It's one event. There's no, there's all those extra factors. I mean, it's not as obvious as that. But a fan might take it that way. I understand.
Do you think it's a problem for cadiaN's career, though? Because, like the whole argument of where there's smoke, there's fire. So now this has happened twice. I mean, pro players, I'm presuming, talk. They don't talk to me, so I don't know what's happening. But I'm presuming if it is a thing of he's difficult to work with, or he's too structured, he won't let you move around, to get into another team, if that's what's being said, I'm sure there's a lot of players and coaches going, oh, I don't know if he's very good, but do we want to deal with that? I mean, it could be that black mark against his name now if he wants to continue his career in a very strong lineup.
Well, I think it's a bit of a peculiar situation, because when you look at cadiaN, he's not like the ideal in-game leader out there, or a guy that has it all. Right, I think you could always, to an extent, question his individual level, right? Considering he's an opera, that's what we used to say about Heroic. Like Heroic is the number one team, second best team in the world. Who are the operas on the contenders? You had Zaivu on Vitality, you had Simple on Navi. You had
Monacy,
Monacy.
It's all like the player of the year contenders.
These are all like some of the most insane players. Even Brokey on FaZe is right somewhere in that ranking. So to be able to do it on top of it all was a testament to Heroic's system and whatnot. So he's not, in that sense, that there are some drawbacks to bringing him to your team, considering how important the role is. And the second thing is, what I could never understand, even from these first rumors, is that he micromanages too much and does all this. So what's strange about that to me is no in-game leader wants to do that. Really, like in the end. Why? Sure. Because it's better, it's easier for you if you have players like he had in Liquid, like Twistzz and YEKINDAR, who take initiative on their own, have their own ideas, can even help in the mid-round with some of the calls. That makes your life easier and allows you to focus more on playing, right? And focus more on your aim and get more frags or whatever, and for your level to raise. So for a player, for a captain to be really like, to take a hard line about relinquishing a little bit of control or anything, just sounds to an extent counterintuitive to me, right? Like you would to an extent welcome that. Like, sure, there's a discussion to be had about how much freedom you give to other players to make calls and make decisions, and you need to be on the same page with what the general approach to the game is, and how the system is supposed to look like and what are your reactions going to be, protocols, that sort of a thing. But in the end, for you, to take such a hard line and be like, no, you need to do what I tell you, Twistzz, or this is when you need to peak. YEKINDAR peak now. Like, to that extent of micromanagement, it's just really hard for me to believe that was the case.
I believe it, Yanko. Here's why I believe it, mate. I'll give you a quick joke. Back in the day, like 10 plus years ago, I worked for a website called On Gamers, and they had a guy there who was just a cameraman from the LA area. He wasn't actually an esports person. And he actually helped them produce like one of the first esports reality series. It was around the League of Legends team, TSM. And basically the joke goes, you'll see where I'm going with this. It was just this one guy. He just had like a proper Hollywood level camera, and it was just one guy. He went there. He came up with the concept for what the episode would be like. He would structure the show. He would interview all the players, and then he would edit it all together and make it like a proper series with like, a storyline and thing. But at the end, as a meme, when he did the credits, the joke of the credits, Yanko, is it was like, filmed by Sean Sullivan, so-and-so, produced by Sean Sullivan, so-and-so, like editing, Sean Sullivan. And the joke is, that's what cadiaN wants, bro. You're right. A normal in-game leader with an appropriate level ego, you're right, goes, hey, guys, I don't want to have to tell everyone what to do. I want input from you. I want to make it all work. But I think cadiaN is the main character, Yanko. And I think at the end, he does want to win and then go, you know what, I IGL'd, they were all my calls. I AWP'd, they were all my kills. I also like told everyone what to do. Twistzz, yeah, he was pretty brilliant. That was my call that he wrote it. I think on some level, look, I'm making it extreme for hilarity's sake, but I think on some level there is a bit of that, because I've always wondered with him, like the most obvious question I've always had with cadiaN is, why does he have to AWP? Like, I always wanted to tell him, bro, as just an AWPer, you were just an AWP whatever player. You were all right. Listen, you weren't bad. Like, even when you were in the rook, you could get kills done, etc. But as we pointed out, you were never anywhere. You weren't even touching m0NESY when m0NESY was 2020 in 2022 when he was a rookie, mate. You were never going to be at that level. So then it becomes, you can sort of make it work as an IGL if you're a mega IGL. So I think the biggest problem he has now is it's all of this combined. It's like, does he have to be the AWPer? Because if he has to be the AWPer already, there's very limited amount of teams will take you. As an IGL, you've just tanked your stock. And then thirdly, if as an IGL, the baggage is you have to control everything. Like, what is the Venn diagram? Who's left in World Counter-Strike that wants you? It'll be like a very small team, I feel like, or just some like bomb team. Like, I don't think, put it this way, I'll just tell you right now, I don't think a single team in the top 15 would ask this player to join. I actually think, to answer your question, Sam, I would go, what career? What career? Like, bear in mind, Heroic, he was at the top of the world. Like, they were like number one at one point. I don't know that this guy's going to be in the top 10 team in like the next year. It looks to me like he might be on the outs in the wilderness.
I think the problem is, the answer to your question would be just the young Danish lineup.
True.
Like similar to what
just rewind the story,
the Heroic was, like, get some talented players and then bring them up. But the problem is that has a ceiling. That ceiling isn't very high, because what will happen is the same thing eventually that happened in Heroic, where the players will, eventually rebel and be like, hey, we can't keep playing like this. It's preventing us from reaching our potential. It's lowering our ceiling. That's why we're not winning some of these trophies. So yeah, I think in reality, I mean, he would have to make some changes to his approach in order to have that opportunity, which is also, I mean, I don't want to hijack this, but it's because I saw people comment now about the team building thing that they did, or how were they not aware of this
video beforehand?
Or how were they not aware of this before they brought him to the team?
Sure.
And listen, I don't mind that, because there's only so much research you can do and conversations that you can have, and also some people are just really good interviewees, right? Like, they will give you all the great answers, and wow, you'll be so happy with them because they know what to say or whatever. But then when it actually comes to playing the team, it doesn't really turn out to be that way, and there's a different side to them that you weren't really able to see. So I wouldn't put all the blame on Liquid and their management for like not doing due diligence, because I'd like to believe that they did, but it's just especially when you have so many players coming from different sides and putting them together until they start playing together, and especially until they come against some adversity, it's almost impossible to know how the team will mesh.
Hear me out for cadiaN career move. Shanghai major analyst. That's what's going to happen, right?
But that's a bit depressing, though. I know.
As if we need more problems. As if we need that.
On the thing about the Liquid knowing what they were getting, I also think I mean I've also seen the tweets, and I think it's a bit unfair because for me the only time you really understand how a group of people are going to work together is when you put them in like a shitty situation. So when you're losing, when you're not getting the results, when the pressure's up and you all have to stand together, and that's when everyone starts pointing fingers, that's pretty much the only time you actually get to see how people gel together. And that's the situation where they either all go, okay, we need to change this and work together, or you've got everyone going, this guy is toxic and we can't deal with him. So I feel like it is a bit unfair for management to take the blame here, because ultimately what they put together, we said it on paper, this was meant to work. How were they to know that these guys weren't going to get along down the line? Because also at the start of the season, I mean, I saw them at Blast Spring Groups, they looked very good together. They looked like they were all getting on. There was lots of laughing and joking. And then as time went on, it changed. I mean, I don't think you can really put that on management's head, to be fair.
I mean, I'll just say as well, I've heard some of the players in the team wanted him as well. So this is also a classic thing that pro players will do. They'll ask you for someone and then afterwards be like, why did you sign him? And say, you told me to. So there's another, by the way, though, that in theory, though, that does splash back on the management because you're supposed to know when to say no. But I would just say, as far as I know, going into it, it was a good faith project. People did want to work with cadiaN. They liked him. This is also, though, one thing I'd ask YNk about. This is where pro players can be infuriating, though, sometimes. Because the problem is, you don't always know if they're really strictly going off stuff in the server as to why they want to play with that guy. Maybe he's just the guy that for real you just have an awesome drink with after every event and you think, hey, we mesh together. Hey, I've got problems in my team. I've got problems in my team. What if we play together, bro? There's some of that happens sometimes. People have like an idea. I mean, the obvious example in history is like people like Nico and Cold Zero. They were like best pals. They wanted to play together like 4 different teams. But then the reality of it was like, it was all right, but obviously didn't set the world on fire and both of them were totally fine going apart. So I think also players sometimes have an idealized version of what the team will be like in the same way as analysts and coaches and management do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also for me it was a little bit weird, the whole conversation, because there was early on an interview with Twistzz, I think, on HLTV where he's like praising cadiaN a ton,
right?
And his style of leading and calling. So it's like, who knows what's really the underlying reason and how many problems and what happened down the line and along the way to really cause such a deep rift within the team where, you know, you were like, oh, this just can't be a thing. There's no way we can move forward with this lineup.
By the way, I'll give you one spicy little soundbite. I also think the way that they kicked him like this at this time implies it wasn't just like we're evaluating who to remove. I think this implies if you didn't kick him, other players leave. Because as I've pointed out, there are, by the way, the obvious ones are Twistzz and NAF. These are very eligible players. There's a lot of top teams, by the way, would like. The joke right now is people like G2 and Vitality might want these players. Like, they can leave. They have leverage.
I mean, they could go. Like, so many teams want both of them.
Yes.
Like they want both of them, but they would even like give a leg for one of them.
Yes.
Because they feel like the needs that both Vitality and G2 need like an experienced player in both of those roles, really. Vitality probably just one, but that's a different topic of conversation. I think just to end like on this note about this team building thing, I think it's a good thing still. I don't think they should regret doing it. We've also seen it succeed with teams like Vitality and Astralis with the past. Mostly Lars Robel was the one who introduced that or doing it on a consistent basis with his teams. I think it's important because we still have some players, especially veteran players, who were there at the, I don't even have to call that era, but at the start, right, where we had nothing. It was just 5 players going from tournament to tournament, all of that. So there wasn't really a lot of professionalism back in those days. It was still just old, smaller scale tournaments, but everything just grew exponentially, and the professionalism didn't really come along with it. It was lagging a little bit behind. So sure, now in a team like Mouse with these young players that are, from the academy team, there's a structure for them that they need to follow, coaches, staff that they need to interact with, and they understand how they need to behave and how to be professional, right? If they want to be on the team and if they want to succeed in this space. So when you have a team, especially with some of the veteran players, and again, different cultures, people who haven't really played before that much, I think it's important to do that, to have a little bit of, and it doesn't have to be, it's not a 5-day thing. It's just like a 2-3 day thing before you get onto the in-game stuff, to make sure like everyone's on the same page and you understand like what you guys talked about. Okay, when things get rough, how do we want to react? What are the things that we want to do? What do we think are the main values, like the things that we need to remember when things are good and when things are bad, all this sort of stuff, because things will be, hopefully really good at some times, and they will definitely be really bad at other times. And I think in Counter-Strike especially, just being able to move on to the next round, right? And no matter what happened, how you lost the round and won it, every new round, it's like poker, right? Like every new round is a new hand. You have to start all over again. You have to be focused to the maximum, concentrated, right? And just do whatever your team needs to help them win the round. And these things are important when it comes to championship level teams, because everyone has good players nowadays for the most part.
Sure.
And everyone has talent, everyone has firepower. It's, why is this team so good? Why does Vitality break down in 3 grand finals, right? Or in the semifinal in Blast, right? Like, why does that happen? And before that, they have a great tournament, or even at Pro League, they beat FaZe, they beat Astralis convincingly, and then they go and lose 3-0 to Mouse, where they don't do anything. Like, the game is not even close. So that's why these things are important. And I think not only at its inception, you probably need to have at least a conversation of that sort down the line, what teams like to call empty the back, that sort of a thing. So I think for championship level teams, definitely, and contender level teams, definitely a good thing and a positive. For some of the teams that are a bit lower and younger players, sure, maybe you're not there yet, that's really necessary, that's the issue for you. You're still trying to figure out the Counter-Strike side of things, but I don't think that was something that negatively impacted this Liquid lineup at all.
I'm just going to say this as well. I'll just put this out there as food for thought. How are people simultaneously going to hate on cadiaN and Bleed for having that practice schedule that showed they were practicing all the time during the RMR, but then you're also going to hate on Liquid for not practicing enough for the RMR? Well, which is it? Like, as far as I can tell, whoever loses, you just say whatever they did was wrong. And as YNk says, if this was Astralis, the 3-day retreat or whatever had been awesome, and then you'd like won the major, we'd all be saying this is how you win the major. It's like the blueprint. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that. I feel like people just use the result for that one just to hate, Because here's what I'd say: why didn't you hate at the time if it was the bad one? You hate it now because the roster didn't work and they kicked him out, guys. Come on.
And also, they didn't play Katowice, so they had that extra 2 weeks to, like they had plenty of time, and they did plenty of practice.
Yeah.
Everyone was sharing that video. I mean, it was all over. They were all sharing it at the time.
Everyone was loving it.
It's so cool. Yeah, look at them all together. Nah, it's a problem. But I think maybe the big question mark in that Liquid lineup, obviously now gone, we've heard he's gone to FURIA, was skullz. So a lot of people said skullz was a mistake. What would you say was the problem with skullz? Because for me, I felt like he did show a lot of potential, and I thought that maybe in a lineup with all these veterans, he could pop off. But I'm presuming also maybe not the first choice for them either. I'd heard rumors about that. Did we dislike skullz as much as some of the internet did?
The problem is, as you alluded to, the rumor was, it was real, by the way, they were trying to get Keserato. They were trying to make an actual, like, cracked out super team. If you think about it, guys, that would have been like 5 HLTV top 20 players, basically. So that's also why when people talk about this project, now, obviously it didn't start as this wasn't, it's a bit like Nexa in G2. Spoiler, he wasn't the first choice. Like, I don't know why we're pretending like they were like a leaderboard and Nexa was at the top of it. Obviously, he wasn't. You took that after a few options weren't there. So similarly, the problem is when you hear that, you get very hyped for the idea of like, holy shit, imagine Keserato on this team. And then also, I think as well, then people heard that story, like it cost 600,000 buyout. Lots of the problem there is in everyone's brain, the number 600,000 is associated with buying Monacy. So people's brain, even though it's a different market, it's different years, they're going to go, wait a minute, I could have bought a Monacy. You can't. But in their brain, they think you're buying a Monacy. And obviously, he was never going to be anything close to Monacy. And then lastly, I couldn't know this until I saw him play, because I only saw him play in Pain, obviously a Brazilian team that didn't have high expectations. And he didn't play many lands either, if people don't know. He was quite inexperienced. To me, the other thing was, I wanted this guy to come in and almost like not look at the nameplates of who he's playing with and just fucking flay and frag out and be like a sensation. I get the feeling, I don't know what you think, but I think it was the opposite. Dude, I think this guy looked like he was pressured so hard the whole time he was in Liquid. Like, I think actually the names, Liquid, the fact he's not in Brazil, I think it did get to him. He looked like a way more sort of muted player to me in this team than I expect him to be. Like, I didn't even think it was the idea he was just bad. I thought he just looked really nervous and lost in the game at times, and like he didn't know what to do and he couldn't be himself. You know what? I'll predict right now, I'll bet he'll be way better in FURIA, and not just because they're Brazilian, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like him and zews came before the team even met for the first time. They came to Europe 2 weeks early so that the skullz can practice a little bit and play
Right.
FPL and whatnot. And they were at my bootcamp place, so I got the chance to get to know him a little bit. We went for food a couple of times, and I mean, the kid seemed great. You know, like great head on his shoulders, like had a great approach. What you're talking about, I think he was saying like, yeah, you know, I'm coming into it, but I still have to. I understand I'm not at the top of the food chain there in terms of space and
Right.
everything, but I still need to do my best and play my game right and contribute to the team, right? I'm not there to just do nothing, right? I have to still do my job and
At least so we thought.
yeah, and execute my role. So I thought he was going to work out well. His English seemed fine. I mean, talking to me, obviously it's going to be a little bit more tricky in game for the first time being on an international team, right? And all of that stuff. There was going to be an adjustment period, but I felt that, you know, that was to be expected. If you're liquid and if you're on that lineup, you know what's happening in practice and in games. And you're just, what you want to see from skullz is when you tell him to, you know, focus on something or work on something, you want to see him work on that and you want to see progress in that area, you know, over time. That's all there is. So that was there to some extent. Probably would have wanted to have seen a little bit more. But then on the other side of things, you see how bad things were within the team, apparently, right? Because they're talking even 2 months before the player break or something like that about making a change, right? So you wonder, in that sort of an environment, how much room did he have, right? How, not necessarily space to make plays. I don't mean that, because he doesn't really need that on the server with the role that he has, but more just how good was, what was the atmosphere like for him to really deliver? And listen,
sure.
I'll be the one who says, for skullz on that team, he's playing to prove himself to everyone else as well.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, he should be doing his 110%, no matter if everyone else is falling apart. They're screaming at each other all the time. Like, you need to find a way to find your little, you know, Japanese pond and your little like peace corner in there and just be able to like play the best you can. And obviously that's easy for me to say. It's a lot more different to do it in that sort of an environment. So yeah, I think it was a little bit disappointing. I think people expected at least a little bit more. He was never going to be the reason they win games or the difference maker in that sense, or at least that wasn't the expectation in the first season.
Sure.
And I think on FURIA, you're hoping that that's going to be better because, okay, it's a full Brazilian lineup and he can go back to speaking Portuguese, right? But it also depends a little bit on what FURIA's goals are and how determined they are to actually doing something, to becoming relevant again.
It was a little bit of a bleeding heart moment for me, but I did think after like the sort of the news about cadiaN came out and the difficulties in the team, I felt a little bit of sympathy for skullz, because I was like, that's really shit that you come into this team, you are the rookie, you have to prove yourself, you got all these top players around you, and then it appears that they're all basically ripping each other's throats out, and you, of course, you're going to kind of like, I'm presuming, fall in. What the hell else are you supposed to do?
Sure.
So maybe he's just, he's probably happy that he's out of like that environment, if it is as bad as what it would appear to be on the surface. But there is a curious way to look at this as well, and it's something that I think a lot of people have brought up in the last few months around. Once it came out that cadiaN his head was on the chopping block, a lot of people said, well, the buck stops with the coach. I mean, Yanko, you've got experience coaching. It must be pretty damn hard to manage. I don't know if these players have egos, but I'm going to use the term ego when you've got top level players all together, because they all presume they know best. As a coach, I mean, how do you make that work? Can you make it work? Because historically we've seen in sports that those big superstar teams tend to not, because of that.
I think that's the toughest aspect of coaching a team like that, you know, because even for me on some of my teams, you know, there's not really much that I can teach all of about how to play. Sure, there's some small things where you kind of put some of the attention on the bigger picture. Basically, that's the main thing where you can help them out. Is like they're sometimes a little bit narrow, like they're just looking at their position or something like that, and you're trying to show them like the whole and something like that, how it works. But when you have players of caliber like Naf and Twistzz and even YEKINDAR, right, like it's not about that. Your job is to get them all to really be able to function together, to create a good atmosphere in the team where people are willing to give up a little bit of themselves, right, and their game, so that the team can work better and for their teammate, right, to get them to not think about me, but think about we, right, and not just look at how to shift blame, but actually constructively be able to discuss and come up with solutions, right? And I always felt my job in essence is to get, you know, the team to the stage, to the playoff, right, when it was FaZe, for example, because when they get to that point, the players take care of a lot of things on their own, because they're also relative to the level of other teams that don't have some of those experienced veteran players. They become relatively much better compared to them, right, because they will even elevate their level a little bit on the stage, while some of the other teams and players will fall off, right? So that's your job, basically, is to get people to, you know, to create a sort of a hierarchy where it's known who's the in-game leader, okay, who's the second voice, and who doesn't need to really give any ideas during the game and should just focus on himself. And then a lot of it, 95% of your job you do in practice, outside of when the game is live. Like, you can do very little once the game goes live, with a couple of timeouts and calls, or even like trying to just not even making a call, but you take a timeout and you're trying to calm the team down. Like, if you weren't able in practice, and like when you're together, to create that sort of an atmosphere where people are not tilting or like getting super agitated and emotional during the game, you're not going to be able to do it by taking like a timeout or two during the game. So all of that stuff is about doing it on time and being aware of what are the most important things to take care of that thing, and managing those personalities. Like you said, like we talked about, okay, people are really excited about the roster, but what were some of the concerns initially? Too many cooks, right? You have cadiaN as the IGL, you have Twistzz, who was, you know, on FaZe for a long time and won a bunch of trophies there. Then you have YEKINDAR, who is known to be extremely vocal on the team and was the IGL of Liquid prior to cadiaN's arriving. And then you have zews as the coach, right, as well, who is going to have some opinions at the very least, even if he takes a little bit of a step back, since he has someone like cadiaN in the driver's seat. So I think that was the biggest challenge, to an extent. And I can't even sit here and say zews failed at that, because it doesn't seem like that the issue was there was like too many voices. It was that the loudest voice, no one agreed with him.
Yes.
And that was the problem.
Yeah, basically, one thing we can't know yet, because obviously all the main parties haven't come out and even given their version of their side. And they're like, thus far, there hasn't even been one of those like reports where people have got a rumor as to what's happened. But if we're speculating that part of the reason why is people didn't like cadiaN's style/approach, I agree. Part of the problem you have there is you sort of all in with cadiaN when you make this team. Like, as I said, he's the ran the IGL, and his last team, he basically was the guy that ran it all, as far as we know. In fact, one of the things people never even give credit to, I notice in the discussion, is people talking heroic like exist. The coach didn't even exist, fully enough. Like, you never hear his bloody name mentioned. Like, we act like cadiaN did absolutely everything in that team. So I say, in some ways, he was getting what he wanted in that team. So I feel like in this squad, if you're zews, like, I agree with YNk, you can get like 2 or 3 big egos or names together and figure out a compromise or a system that works. You can, even if people don't know extreme cases, like back in the day. I remember one was like back in the day when Malik was in G2 and they had shocks. He had to do all sorts of wizardry, like trick shocks into thinking that he was the IGL, but only on pistol rounds, you know, like stuff like that, where it's like, at that point, you're not even really doing like a normal team approach. You're actually doing a very curated system to make everyone's ego coexist, but people still do what they're good at. So it's implied to me, it's the same thing. Like, I think you could have made a compromise between YEKINDAR, Twistzz, cadiaN, whatever the mix is, but you can't if the system is cadiaN's position is I do it all, and then their position is but we don't agree with that. Like, there's no compromise there. Like, that fundamentally doesn't work.
And also, Sam, to answer your question, like, how do you get or how do you establish authority in that environment? I mean, first of all, like the players like that will see through all your bullshit. Like, they have very, if any, tolerance for, and you know, you giving like any sort of speeches and long statements and something like that, it's difficult to beat. Works with maybe some players, certain personalities, but a lot of the times they will just be yawning and their thoughts will be about something else. It's mostly about knowing Counter-Strike, right? And just knowing what you're talking about. Whether that's Counter-Strike for some, great. Whether that's building the team and like talking about relationships and attitudes in the team, sure. But you need to know what you're talking about, and for the players to see when you tell them something and they try it, that it works. Sometimes, yes, the players, especially early on when I started coaching, they were so stubborn that if you come up with an idea that they don't really understand or don't like at first, like it's hard to get them to even try it. But I think things are a little bit better now, and you can definitely do that. I think it's weird though, from what we've talked about, Duncan, is also, I mean, the rumor is, I think it was Richard who said that Zeus is also on the way out.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I was going to bring that up.
So if that's the case, then must have been something that they are displeased with him as well, because to remove him as well so quickly. And you have Twistzz, who's supposed to become the IGL, right? So Zeus is not being removed if Twistzz is saying, no, I want this guy, I really like it. So it seems like maybe the players were, I don't know if they were also unhappy with some
Looks
of the
like a player mutiny, doesn't it? Just us from the outside. Come on.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I suppose it's also difficult as a coach as the coach, you need to work closely with the IGL, right? So you probably, to try and make it work, you buy into cadiaN's system. Now your head's on the chopping block as well because you bought into that system. Maybe I'm a Zeus stan, so like I'm going to try and defend him the whole way. But I'm curious as to how that coaching dynamic works.
Well, here's the problem, and this was a problem for a while, and it's still a problem with some teams. It's like, what's the actual hierarchy? Like who is at the top of this mountain? Is it the IGL or is it the coach? Right? And who has the final say, and what are you going to do, and what does your organization look like? Because on paper, yeah, it should definitely be the coach. Like, let's say you are Team Liquid, you want to build a Counter-Strike division, right? You need to hire a general manager, right? You need to hire your guy who's going to get you all the pieces. What does the general manager do? He has a general understanding of Counter-Strike, obviously, of the scene, and let's say he also has understanding of what's his budget, what kind of players he wants, what's the goal, who can he get, all that sort of a thing. So, okay, I believe in this sort of brand of Counter-Strike, let's say. I need a coach now who can fill up those requirements and then I could get. And then you interview him and you tell him, listen, this is what I expect from you. You are going to be in charge of the team, right? The buck stops with you when it comes to that, and that's how it's going to be set up. And you will have, for me, as the organization, will let players know that in negotiations and let them know how the team is going to be set up. Okay, you do that, and then you have the coach, obviously, in conversations with the GM. You talk about, okay, which players do we want, right? Which players can we get? You build your team. But then the understanding on the team is like, obviously, the in-game leader coach, that's the duo nowadays, right? In a lot of situations, that's the relationship that we talk about. And when we talk about team's performance, we don't really blame the coach or the IGL. We always talk about that duo. So that's important. And the coach has to, when picking his IGL, he needs to pick someone who he knows sees the game in a similar way, right? And agrees on how the game should be played in general, obviously. And someone who will agree and respect the fact that, if they're 50-50 about something and the coach says we're going to do it this way, that's how he needs to do it. And he needs to do it, with 110% belief that that's the right way. And obviously along the way, you review and you make adjustments and so on. And then you do the same thing with the players, right? Players come in, okay, you know who's going to be your veteran second voice. You talk about that dynamic, how it's going to look like, but everyone understands on the team that the coach is sort of the overarching boss. But again, it's tricky. Why? Because you can't be a sort of a dictator and just tell people, oh, you're going to have to do it this way, you're going to have to do that. So that's obviously the most tricky part, is building that team, finding people and getting them to work together where they will agree to do things a little bit differently, like where, as I said, will agree to give a little bit of ego for the greater good of the team. Like, that's something that you see, for example, in MOUZ. It's obvious in the way they speak in interviews as well. Like, they are the model for that sort of an environment. But that's more difficult when you have star players Why? Because they usually have a little bit of ego, and you want them to have that.
Sure.
So that's the problem. Like, you should never be in a position where let's say you're Zeus and everything's going cadiaN's way. But then what are you then? You're just an observer. Like, you're just a passenger on this, train that you see is going into a mountain. And what are you doing? Sure. You're just adding coal, like, so that it keeps going, right? Like, that's why Kassad left Cloud9 after a month.
Yeah, I've always said, by the way, that was actually super smart, because people forget now that he was even the coach, because he wasn't there at the end when it was a flaming wreck, like you said.
Yeah, like, you need to be able to, because what's the point otherwise? Then you're just working on someone else's ideas. You're not where's the satisfaction?
By the way, there is actually one detail I can tell you. I won't claim that I know anything about the current Team Liquid for now, officially, but in the past I have had friends within Team Liquid. I can tell you, actually, unlike a lot of other orgs, they are an org which I do think does a fatal flaw. So I'll give you the example, Yanko. I think actually the flaw Team Liquid have made over the years is they've got a bit of the Dallas Cowboys in them, mate, where if people don't know, famously, in the Dallas Cowboys, the owner has like way too much input in the team, instead of just like, hiring the general manager and the coach and letting them do it and then firing them if they're bad. So what I would say is this: I've noticed that Liquid is a bit of an old school org, because when I used to work at SK over 10 years ago, this is how they ran it. Before there were coaches and GMs, what you used to do as an owner is, you don't know the game, you haven't got time to watch all these demos. So what you do is you pick one of your players who's usually a veteran or someone who's there for a long time, and he's like a winner or a good player, and you sort of take the logic of like, he's going to be like my sort of general in the room, as it were. Like, I'm going to trust his calls, and he'll tell me if we need to make a player change, he'll tell me if the results are good, and I'll sort of let him relay the info. And all I'll say is this: to me, in Liquid, I knew this way back in the day when I was friends with Hiko and he joined the team. I can tell you, Hiko was that guy initially. That's why, if you notice, the kinds of people Hiko didn't want in the team anymore, and they did one, they came and went. After that, it was Elise for many years. There's a reason why he sort of got to have all his spots, all his roles, and his best games, etc. People complained, including certain people in Liquid now, but maybe they didn't have their roles or their space. Then after that, I would speculate it became YEKINDAR. YEKINDAR came in the team, revitalized it. They were willing to fire fucking Nitro guys and just put YEKINDAR as agile. They let him sort of run the team. I would suspect now Twistzz is that guy. And so unfortunately, to bring it all back, the real issue here is, I feel like you maybe could have made the system work, but you needed to all commit to cadiaN being that guy. Otherwise, what was the point in it all? Because in this scenario, it feels like, whether or not people said all the right things at the beginning about being willing to work and integrate people in their system if you're cadiaN, maybe Twistzz and them said all the right things. Hey, I'm willing to, learn a new approach. That everyone says the best thing going in, because you all do want to succeed. The problem in this scenario, as we've seen here, is what happens 3 months down the line when maybe a Twistzz or an AF does go, maybe I don't fuck with this system, actually. In fact, maybe I don't even want to do this approach. Like, then it becomes like the Game of Thrones issue of like, who has the power? Who is the leverage? Who are we going to, if we're going to have to pick, if we have to make the choice, who are we going to pick? Are we going to pick cadiaN and Zeus in this case? Or are we going to pick to keep Twistzz or whatever? So I also think it's not as simple as like, everyone's equal or there's one guy. But I think there's also like pre-existing dynamics in the team potentially, and biases, understandably.
Holy shit, if that is how it's being run, though, that's a bit of a mess for like the future. I don't think players should dictate.
I mean, the players shouldn't dictate, but you should definitely talk to, like, if Elige is your guy or if Twistzz is your guy. Yeah, you should definitely ask him for his opinion and sort of not necessarily like make him happy fully, but there's a reason why these guys are so good. They also have this knowledge, so yeah, they should definitely be in the conversation potentially, right? But definitely not the ones who make the decision, right? Like, why not use, I think of that as a resource. If you have a player who's so experienced and who's been on different teams, different lineups, failed in different ways as well, can help you with saying, oh yeah, we made a mistake by getting a guy who was really good but too inexperienced when we had this sort of a lineup. So it can be interesting.
Onto the fun stuff, because this is always exciting when we try to guess what's going to happen. So obviously, Nitro announces he's coming back to Counter-Strike, and everyone says he's going to Liquid. There is no world where he goes back to Liquid now, surely.
But especially to me, because in the interview, it's actually heavily intimate. He's going to come back as a player. So that's the part I don't buy. Like, I don't believe there's a world where they're announcing Nitro as a player. It's just a team. Like if it was implied, Yanko, he might be a coach. Yeah, maybe there's a world there, because obviously, like, first of all, they're a team that's had issues with coaches. And then secondly, Nitro was their dude. Like, they obviously liked the way he set things up. He's obviously willing to listen. I could believe that. But the thing is, from the way it's implied, I get the feeling he's just coming to a normal team. Like maybe he's going to be on like an NRG or some stupid squad. I feel like it's not Liquid personally, but I haven't got inside info on that one.
No, that would be crazy, especially considering the statements coming from Twistzz and or the camp that, you know, Twistzz is going to be the IGL. Because for me, like, he's 24. Twistzz is still only 24. Like,
Sure.
for him to go into that full time, I don't think that's a good idea. What I think it might be a good idea, though, if you're Team Liquid and you're like, okay, this project, the way it is, failed, we need to make some changes, but the market might not be what we want right now, because who are they going to get as an offer? What, you're going to go
there's
get?
no one right now.
You're going to get Hades? Like, that's what, you know, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is they'll get a couple of players that are, you know, maybe interesting, that are serviceable.
Are these stopgap players, you think, YEKINDAR?
Yes, that more than anything,
right,
YEKINDAR and Twistzz and NAF will, you know, give you give you their blessing that they are going to be fine playing with them and have a good time potentially playing with them. And you're going to let Twistzz in-game lead for the second season, right? Let him dip his toes into it. Let him gain some experience doing it. And meanwhile, even now, you're sort of thinking about next year. And you're maybe even talking to some players about next year, because the pool might be a little bit deeper of players than it is now. And you would have more options in a sense, because another thing that is factored in now is the cutoff point for the qualifiers for the major,
you've got to do it
and
very
for
quickly,
the RMR. So any team that, you know, no team wants to lose a player.
Oh, by the way, YEKINDAR, that would also make the price way higher. I mean, it's bad enough for your Team Liquid, by the way. You're already going to get charged higher, like I've heard the big squads do. But you're right, the cutoff means that they will just put a 0 on the number for real.
Yeah, because if a team is in danger of, you know, not making the cut, or even like having to go from the RMR to the closed qualifier, like, that's a big sort of risk, and that you need to take as a team to agree to that. So yeah, I expect something like that from Team Liquid. I don't expect for us to see some blockbuster addition in the opping role and some, you know, you probably can't even get to really good, like that would be an insane amount of money, like even next year, I mean, even for next year. But so yeah, I would expect some budget solutions. I would still be shocked if Nitro came in, because, you know, he would be a great on paper addition for them, because you know he's a great teammate, great guy to be around. NAF and Twistzz have played with him, even YEKINDAR, actually everyone's played with him before. So, you know, but I think that's a step worse than getting Nexa back to G2.
Oh, it just drops that at the end. Point. Okay, fucking hell. Is that the go-to bad example?
I like that.
I think it will be.
What do we think of Twistzz as an IGL, though?
What?
The problem with that is no one can know. We can't possibly know. The worst thing about that is there's two parts that I kill her for there. One, despite Team Liquid having all these problems, his game looks awesome. Like, his game actually looks better than it was in FaZe Clan at the end. So the reason why it's such a nightmare is because, especially rifle play, like, I don't want a player like that to give that roll up, because does he really keep his game at the same level? Probably not. And then the worst thing is, as YEKINDAR himself shows, if you don't like this move and it's a stopgap, like Janko says, and you just tried it out for a season, let's say you do what they did with YEKINDAR. It's okay, no harm, no foul. You're not the in-game leader anymore. Well, YEKINDAR tanked his game, didn't he? Like, that player isn't a HLTV top 20 player anymore. He used to be one of the best players in the world, literally. Like, he was like top 5 at his role permanently.
Well, just food for thought, Duncan, because it's not really the topic, but maybe just Jane was making him look good, because he, outside of that team, never looked as good.
He definitely wasn't as good, sure. By the way, I also think as well, this guy, you know, I have that saying for people like Stewie2K, Fallen, where they're like CS royalty. Like, once they've got their championships and their status, there's a certain type of fan will defend them no matter
CS
what.
royalty, come on. Like,
bro, what are you talking about? He just won a tournament with 0.8 rating, and people were like, it's a giant G2. Like, what are you talking about? Bro, if anything, like, he was on it too long in that tournament. Like, I'd have taken the soap at the end, you know. So anyway, no, the point is this, though. Mate, YEKINDAR, how does this guy get to just skate? Bro, people are acting like he went from 2022 Liquid to this. He just tanked the team IGLing, and now he was shit as a player. But I noticed there's not a single person in the whole convo of Liquid. It's never implied he gets kicked. He just gets to stay forever. Like, what the fuck? Because that's one thing I'll just put, here's some food for thought for you if you all hate skullz. You're all going to go, but look, Liquid proves skullz is shit. Well, then logically YEKINDAR shit. There you go. He was in the same team. You can't go, skullz can't get it done. Where's the fragging? Well, then I saw YEKINDAR get his head banged off a million times, mate. So I just think that's a bit rough, the way like that one, he just gets to skate on that one. Well, just cool with that. Like, what?
Well, I mean, I was saying before for Liquid, like, YEKINDAR and skullz were both playing for their job. I didn't really know anything about the cadiaN thing. So it's like, they both might go if they don't step up at the end of the season. And even with YEKINDAR, it was a bit really obvious that he's overdoing it, like trying to do too much, just
for sure,
unnecessarily throwing his life away in certain situations, you know. And sure, he has this role where he's the tip of the spear, and sometimes it's just about creating space. It's not all about stats, believe me, I know that. But even with that in mind, it just wasn't really enough, because then you're seeing like Naf and Twistzz going above and beyond for Liquid to be able to win like a 13-11 game. You know, it wasn't feasible.
Because the reason I think the YEKINDAR one can't be ignored is, look, I do think the reason why Liquid never became a great team is obviously cadiaN and zews and the rest of the structure. But if YEKINDAR, I don't even need him to be 2022 form or 2021. If he'd just played for real 10% better, they'd have won loads of these games. Like, there were so many times, like I said, they would lose 13-10, and he would just have a bad T-half or something, you know, or he couldn't get an entry, and like, they could have won so many of these games.
It's a little bit of that, and some of it is, you know, on some maps they looked really good, like Ancient, and then on some maps it was pretty bad. So I think it was not being able to translate that style on multiple maps, and the map pool not being deep enough, which probably, you know, means that it makes sense in a way, because along the way they got stuck and started disagreeing, and then couldn't do the same work and get to that level on more maps, because already friction started happening.
I thought when they announced that cadiaN, when the rumors started that cadiaN was going to go, I was shocked, because I thought YEKINDAR should have been on the chopping block. I thought it should have been on the chopping block a while back, but I'm sort of with you on that, Thorin. But obviously, the player mutiny helped him out. I know Yanko's weighed in on what he thinks Liquid's going to do roster-wise. Are you in agreement? Do you think that is the case as well?
The big problem I have as well is, like, that's why, in a way, you almost have to try doing Twistzz IGL, because the other problem you've got if you kick cadiaN is, like I implied, he already is doing roles I don't even really think work together, even though Device is sort of making it work. Like, he's IGL and AWP at the same time, so you need to recruit 2 players now because you kicked him. So instead, they're trying to, like, you don't have to recruit 1 because we're just going to keep Twistzz and make him IGL. But then I agree, like, I don't know what AWP you're possibly going to get that's going to make this team that good. Like, even when people are mentioning names, like, I've seen people try to mention, like, names that aren't that big, but you'd gamble on them. Like, an example would be, like, Slend from Gamer Legion. You know, he's shown some skills. He's not that well known, so maybe he'd leave Gamer Legion. The difference is, like I say, I don't think you guys realize you won't get that guy for 50k. That will be like, again, like, you better get like $500,000 out, then maybe we can talk. And at that point in time, aren't you doing the skullz thing again? Aren't you paying like big money for what's not a guaranteed success? And then you bring that guy in, and what, he has like a month of not that great AWP, and suddenly you want him kicked too. So I think the problem is, I'm actually with Yanko. I think if anything, they probably be a bit cynical next season and sort of min-max, as it were, and use players that they know they're not going to keep long term, and basically use next season to figure out, am I kicking YEKINDAR? Am I sticking with Twistzz? Twistzz sleep? You figure out where everything is. Because at this point in time, the really tough thing as well is, I feel like you have to spend a lot of money to get out of the trouble and get back to a good place again. And if you spend the money, you've just doubled down again. You just put more money in. Like, the problem is, no one wants a team Liquid to have a season off. You're supposed to always be challenging. So I think they're in a really tough spot, personally.
Aren't they also in a tough spot because they have to get a player from the Americas in order to keep their RMR spots as well? I mean, doesn't that limit their choices? I never understand how this works. So
no, well, what they can do is, here's the thing, they could get JKS, because then they're 2-1, and he's considered like that. I think then it's considered neutral, and you can pick whether you want to go to EU or NA.
Right.
And I think also, I mean, one of the players that would be on my mind until the whole NRG thing would be OC, right? I mean, that's one where you're thinking, okay,
work to them.
Yeah, exactly, like deserving of a chance, perhaps. So, you know, him and JKS, for example, that could be your thing, and you have YEKINDAR, Twistzz, and OC playing the pack, and then Naf and JKS playing on the sides, with Naf being the more aggressive sort of lurk in that situation. Again, that seems like a cool team, you know, to build with people that you're familiar with. Twistzz also played with JKS when JKS was standing in Katowice when they lifted the trophy. So I don't think it would be, you know, difficult to get him in terms of, I don't even know if he's like a free agent now.
As far as I know, you can just get him, yeah.
Or he's still, and, you know, the NRG one might be tricky. or something like that. But worst case, you could get someone else as an AWPer, right? But I think getting JKS would be good for them to avoid that thing with which RMR do you play in. And I don't know, for JKS, it's kind of weird. He hasn't played for a while, so it might be an opportunity for him again to sort of showcase his skills and who knows, maybe even remain on that team longer term or get an offer from someone else.
Even though everyone else, while we live in the sticker money world, would say this is stupid, I would just say, check if you've got a pair of fucking nuts. Like, you already filled the RMR with this fucking Frankenstein squad of 2 people from here to... So what I would say is, if you end up having a side European player, but he's good, just fucking qualify through the RMR. If you're actually any good, you're going to do it. You are aware, guys, people like Ecstatic qualified to the last major. Like, it's not like you have to have like FaZe Clan's roster. So I'd also say if you have a good enough player, it's a good problem to have. You know?
I forgot. I said this on our podcast. They should get simple. Get simple in JKS.
Simple and JKS. I mean, I don't know if they can afford
Bring simple back.
Listen, just for the vlogs alone, YNk. The vlogs alone, mate. You know.
If
I'm in for the reality content.
Run it back. He had that romantic stay with Liquid. What was it now? 8 years ago, in 2016. So, yeah, talk about a gamble.
Oh, the only thing is, though, I would like to see if you really want to test if Twistzz is committed to being an IGL, give him semi-washed simple for 2 months, mate. I'll test him right there, mate. If he can qualify for that, like that's like getting like your forklift license. Like you're qualified. You can do this job.
He might take some time off after that, not just just as a player, not even as an IGL.
Sure.
They couldn't deal with cadiaN, and now you want to put something.
I know exactly.
Can you just imagine the chaos? I mean, to wrap this all up, so what I'm gathering from what we're all saying is that if you're a Liquid fan, best put any hopes and dreams on the shelf and wait till next year. Is that where we end this with Liquid? Which is kind of so sad when you think about how exciting they were at the beginning of the year.
It's why I say the real killer for me is just that Twistzz was the best player in the team, and now he's probably going to limit himself by being the IGL. That's the bummer, because in a way, like, you could still watch Liquid games and just enjoy Twistz's game, couldn't you? And be like, hey, fuck it out, this is awesome, or Naf's winning the clutches. The real concern I have is, like, to me, this is one of those weird things where I see how it solved your current problem, but I don't see how it gets you to where you want to be. Like, if the problem was, like, Liquid, if we're being realistic, Liquid probably was like a 10th or 9th best team in the world. They weren't trash, but I don't see how these moves, whoever they bring in now, unless it's actually simple, I don't see how it gets you top 5. So I feel like actually the weirdest thing is you are almost committing to sort of like a fallow season where you're just going to test things out and see what the next year's about.
Yeah, I think simple and JKS gives Liquid Hail Mary chance of actually being a contender team by the end of the season. I just appreciate that you've done an actual HLTV forum move, like plus simple, plus JKS, even though like it's irrelevant of the content. I love it. Yeah, just like, because then you have 5 guys who are all actually winners, okay, YEKINDAR so-and-so, but he's been on the team for a long time. And I think it's safe to say he understands Counter-Strike, like he has good game sense. Or you're just sort of like, hey, we just failed we took a big swing and we missed. Let's just get a couple of stopgap solutions, see how this Twistzz IGL thing pans out, figure out who's going to be our coach for the long term, decide on that, and then try to make the most out of next season, but really build for 2025. By
the way, the joke would be, imagine how underwhelming as a Liquid fan if they were like, good news, guys, we brought our new players, Nitro and Orseed. You're like, what the fuck? It's just basically the old Liquid. What the hell's this? Like, I couldn't even see a world where that's like not impossible,
that's what worries me. I'm like that. I mean, that could happen, and that would make me very sad. Anyway, if you're a Liquid fan, tell us what you think is going to happen, or it's happened already before this episode came out. I'm sorry for that, and we'll be back soon. Also, YNk, I'm still terrified of you.
As you should be.